Counter-Narrative News, bringing you daily news today on Thursday, the 30th of March 2023. One of the oldest think tanks in the world, very much closely associated with and attached to the military establishment in Britain, RUSI, the Royal United Services Institute, has issued a fascinating report assessing the Russian campaign of occupation and annexation in Ukraine from February 2022. To sum up the report, it highlights a number of things which are of interest. First of all, it argues quite correctly that the Russian state has applied onto Ukraine its experiences and general learning from its experiences from its wars and conflict to contain and pacify the Chechen people and nation. And it's applied that in terms of Chechen special forces carrying a lot of the dirty work strategically in Ukraine, in terms of targeting, interrogation, torture and killing, but also the manner in which an occupied force seeks to pacify the occupied people, from the experience from Russia and Chechnya applied now to Russia on Ukraine. It also argues that what's been widely known is that Putin thought he would take over the entirety of Ukraine and its capital Kiev within about 72 hours, and that did not happen at all. And the reasons therefore are that Putin thought he could do to Ukraine what he has done to other places through destabilization. So basically threatening Ukraine with a war and demanding that it stop any type of process in the orientation of NATO and the European Union. But the Ukrainian political class refused to do that. And if they had agreed, there would have been protests in the street, destabilization, and through that chaos, Russia could strategically try to seek its own aims. That didn't happen at all. Secondarily, much of the military leadership had given Putin the wrong impression, and Putin himself had the wrong impression, that things would be a relative walkover and the military leadership in Ukraine would fold into the Russian occupation and aggression of Ukraine. That did not happen either. This also points to perhaps Putin was dizzy with success in his operations against Georgia, Crimea, Syria, and Kazakhstan leading up to his campaign against Ukraine a year ago. But we'd really encourage people to read the report in its entirety. It's a fascinating report and does illuminate a lot of interesting things. Going over to the USA and its relations with Iran and Syria, the Pentagon's most senior Army General, Mark Milley, has argued that the USA should be targeting more harshly Iranian presence in the region and including Syria, following a spat of tit-for-tat attacks between the US neo-colonial occupation force in northern Syria, which was invited into Syria by Vladimir Putin. And also reports are indicating that it's not just quote-unquote Iranian-backed militia in Syria that's conducting this resistance operation against the US colonial presence there, but it's actually just Syrian tribes who are upset, obviously, that they're an occupied people by this colonial force. However, US Army General Mark Milley, who's made these comments, has made some quite militaristic, kind of adventurous comments before, which he's had to dial back on. And Mark Milley's comments also reflect the fact that since coming to the presidency of Joe Biden in January 2021, he has given the green light of 4 different military attacks against what they claim is Iranian-backed militia, etc. And this is in the context of up to 83 attacks on the USA presence in the Middle East, not all of which can be attributed very narrowly to quote-unquote the Iranian presence, but also the Quds force of the IRGC military establishment in Iran are a prescribed terrorist organization in the United States, and Mark Milley is using that to try and push forward more military actions against it. Finally, the Vatican has formally repudiated its quote-unquote doctrines of discovery from the Vatican Church, which then informed the colonial genocidal actions of the Vatican and its allied entities in the Spanish, Portuguese and English states in the colonization and genocides against the African and the peoples of the so-called New World. Documents from the Vatican from 1452, 1455 and 1493 have all been repudiated by the Vatican, arguing that this did not it wasn't just, and this shouldn't have allowed these type of genocidal practice to occur, and they accept that this was often done with no opposition from the Vatican itself. So it's probably a means by which the Vatican can see that there's a chasm across the world, particularly in the global south and Africa and in the Americas, as to just a moral vacuum where everything is shifted towards the right and the far right. So the Vatican and the Pope is trying to intervene to gain more followers from this, and probably they'll be have some successes in so doing. But also they're competing with the right-wing forces of this kind of white supremacist, revanchist evangelicalism, etc., which is informing movements like Trump and Bolsonaro, etc. So it's quite a fascinating situation, and it indicates the general absence of a actually existing anti-colonial socialism anywhere on the planet, which is absent, therefore all these other political opportunisms of neo-colonialism and coloniality itself are trying to gain traction here. That was Counter-Narrative News. Please do continue to support us. Please encourage your friends and your contacts to subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on Twitter at @count_CNN. We wish you a fantastic day. Many thanks.